now convene the Minturn Town Council meeting for November 6, 2024. Roll call, please.
Gusty here. Brian here.
Lynn here.
Kate here.
Tom here.
Eric, are you here?
Eric's here.
And Earl's here. Okay. Next, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next thing on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda.
And I would like to recuse myself.
Okay. Do we have an item that wants to be pulled out of the consent agenda for discussion? I don't think you need to recuse yourself. Just don't vote.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I'll second that.
Motion by Kate, second by Gusty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on, we have the regular agenda for approval. Any amendments, revisions?
There are no amendments to the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular agenda as presented.
Second. Motion by Gusty, second by Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Next, we have a declaration of the conflicts of interest. Is there anyone on the board that has any issue on the agenda that you need to recuse yourself from? Hearing none. We now would like to open this up to public comment. This is, as long as it's not on the agenda, we'd like to hear from you, and you can address council. Just state your name and address, please. Okay. Jay, anybody out there?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving on. Next, we have council comments and committee reports.
I attended my first High Five board meeting, and we approved the 2025 budget. They operate a lot on grants and donations. So, I know Colorado Gives Day is coming up December 10th, and if any donations could be sent their way, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Gusty. Brian?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Lynn?
I don't have anything.
I'd like to make an announcement as far as Core Transit. They were honored by the Large Community Transit Agency of the Year Award from Colorado Association of Transit Agencies Conference. It's pretty phenomenal that in our first couple of years of operation, we're getting that, and that's for the large transit systems. So kudos to the staff there, and also to everyone that voted this system into the county. It was pretty incredible. The statement on the award was Core Transit was a clear choice of this award. Their ability to stand up a brand new regional transit authority while increasing service, going fare-free, and transferring the current operations from Eagle County to Core Transit in just about 20 months is a monumental accomplishment. That was from the executive director. So, you've done good so far. Okay, next we have the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few updates that are not on my manager's report, which is within the packet. If anyone has any questions from my manager's report within the packet, I'm happy to answer those. Additional updates include that I had a follow-up meeting with CDOT regarding safety impacts to Main Street. A few of the topics that we discussed were the AVIS program, and that's the speed radar program. I heard from several council members that that's probably not a direction that the council wants to go. I would recommend that council members that are available consider meeting with the AVIS folks that are going to be out in Eagle County next Wednesday. They're meeting with Gypsum and Vail, and they can meet with Minturn as well. This is a fully customizable option for Minturn, which does not have to include tickets. It can include warnings. It can include letters reminding folks to slow down and be safe. So there's a lot of opportunity to communicate with drivers that may not be of a punitive nature. So it might be worth talking to the company to learn more about it if we remain interested in finding ways to reduce speeds on Main Street.
Would that data not be useful for us in dealing with CDOT?
The data would be available for our use, and all data tends to be helpful when trying to communicate a position when you're negotiating something. So that could potentially prove helpful as well. Additionally, we talked with CDOT about the bulb outs and just kind of had a follow-up on the struggles that we experienced. Our goal with increasing safety for pedestrians and residents, but at the same time, making sure that we have plenty of parking for our businesses, which are few and we cherish them. So where do we find that balance? So I asked CDOT if we could re-review the bulb outs that were approved to find ways to shrink the size of the bulb outs to basically emulate the current yellow no parking that we have right now, so not expanding any no parking areas, and potentially still leaving them temporary so that we can try it again and see how that might work. They have agreed that although that is not to CDOT standards, they're willing to take that back to their permitting review team to see if that's something they would be willing to support. So it would still allow pedestrians to have a safe refuge when trying to cross the road, but have a shorter distance to cross and an increased line of sight, and also increased line of sight for cyclists and motorists trying to turn onto Highway 24 while again not taking away any current parking. So we'll see where we get with that. It's in the review stage right now.
A question on that. In our initial meeting that we had with them, they seemed very, I don't know how to put it. It seemed like they were saying one thing that was, we need to change this redesign. We understand that signs and enforcement and the things that we looked at in the past are not going to make any changes. And I think we heard that from our community when they came in for the bulb out discussions. They said, why are we focusing on some of this? You know, the speeds are the main problem. There's several intersections that were identified. Did they bring any of that up in the second? So it seems like they did that in the first meeting, and then it sounds like in the follow-up meeting they were more going kind of back to the same old thing, like we'll put up more speed signs. And like, were they willing to further discuss some of the stuff that they had promised in that meeting that we had with our representatives?
Yes, so they discussed modifying the bulb outs to better meet our needs while increasing traffic calming by narrowing the road. They also discussed Minturn's ability to file, so we are now filing for a crosswalk and rapid flashing beacon at the Little Beach Park intersection. So that's underway right now. And I got word that they should be done with our speed study early spring. I took the first two as wins. The third was so that was steps from where we had come from before. I also, from feedback that we received from the community, requested a ghost car from the sheriff's office. The community requested a ghost car. I don't know how those work, but I sent an email asking for what I quoted as a ghost car, and they said they would work at trying to bring one into our community. So it again would just be a way to help remind folks to drive safely through town, but no actual enforcement.
So I wasn't aware that there was opposition on council for the ABIS system.
ABIS.
ABIS, yeah, the ABIS system.
I just received a few emails regarding concern about becoming more of a speed trap in town.
Well, no, that's, I don't know, for decades, I've been hearing people complaining about speed going through town. And I also part of Mayor's Leadership Caucus and the mayor of Golden and, Lakewood and Lone Star both have these systems, and they said it's unbelievable how well it works. And I know the deputy, Peterson, had said there's a lot of work on the back end, but this, if we get the system, same system they had, there's no work on the back end. It's all automated, and they just send it on, and the information is there. So I'd like council to consider that and listen, at least have a presentation from Avis to see what we have, because, you know, over the years, it's always been the most major complaint we have. And of course, I always believe the number one job we have is public safety. So I would really like to see them here, if it's okay with council, and in fact, at least investigate it.
Thank you. And again, if there's 2 council members that are available next Wednesday to meet with Cindy, she'll be meeting with the folks on the ground as well. And last,
Michelle? What time? Next Wednesday?
I can find out. I'm
Okay.
sorry that I don't know yet.
All right. Thanks.
But I can find that out for everybody. I'll send an email out. And lastly, I would like to say a huge thank you to all of the clerks that made yesterday happen, especially Minturn's clerks, Deputy Clerk Cindy Krieg, and our very own Master Municipal Accredited Clerk, Jay Brunvand. They have run our elections so smoothly for so many years, and we're so fortunate to have them. I thank them both. And then on top of that, those who we could not have an election without them, are illustrious election judges. We had Elmer Christensen, who is a longtime Minturn judge, and new this year joining him was Jill Kanakis. We were very privileged to have them here, and we're so thankful for our local volunteers that make these things occur. So thank you very much. Judge Jill.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for thanking them, because it's kind of a thankless job these days. Okay, anything else? Anything else for Michelle?
Unless anyone had any questions from my report on the packet.
Alrighty, moving on, we have special presentations. We have 3 of them this evening. The first one is a presentation about phase 2 of the Main Street Sidewalks update. And is Celeste here?
Yep, so Celeste is online with us. Celeste is with Stolfus Engineering, who has been an engineering firm who has worked with us through several projects, including the phase 1 sidewalk and drainage project, and now we are on to phase 2. There have been substantial changes from the initial phase 2 design to what we have with, now to present before you tonight. So Celeste is here to provide you with an update as we are scheduled for construction starting in 2025. Celeste, take it away.
Apologies, I shared my screen and then I totally lost my microphone. I couldn't get off mute. But hello, everyone. I am Celeste Chavez-Shin with Stolfus and Associates, as Michelle said. I am new to your council. It's my first time presenting, so thank you for having me. I did have the opportunity of working on phase 1 of this project as a designer, so I got to go design in and out everything. The driveways were particularly challenging in that first phase, and I am glad that that got built, and I'm really excited that we get to keep building and adding on to this project. So as Michelle said, there have been quite a bit of changes, and I will walk you kind of through everything here. And I'm going to start just with, these are moving around over here. Great way. With a project overview. So this first slide here shows the vision, right, for this entire corridor and the rest of it. So it connects to the existing sidewalk right where you guys have the ending, which is your mid-block crossing where you've got your flashing beacons going. So it starts there, and then we continue on both sides of the road all the way through to Boneyard open space. So that's about 3,600 linear feet of sidewalk, over 1,000 linear feet of pipe, and 31 driveways. So your project goals are just, everything that you guys have been talking about. It's all about pedestrian safety, safety of your entire town, really providing those accessible routes and connectivity between your downtown Minturn and South Minturn, as well as connecting some of those transit stops and those school bus stops. And this also formalizes, right, that phase one kind of footprint of having parking along both sides of Main Street all the way to just short of Boneyard open space.
Question, Celeste. The pipe you mentioned, is that storm drainage pipe?
Yes.
Okay.
That is all a storm system. So you can kind of see it here. It's those really dark black lines going through. The first project provided basically a full drainage system for you. And part of this one, this very first part, connects to that. And then you have two other outlets as well, connecting both sides and then outloading over into Eagle River.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of funding, the original construction estimate was created back in 2022. That's when you guys applied for Revitalizing Main Street grant, and it was right around $2.2 million. Now that covered design, construction, as well as right-of-way acquisition. And we learned this week that CDOT has seen 25% compounding increase over the last 3 years in construction costs. So keep that in mind as we go through here, because here we are 2 years later, right, trying to get this project out. So in terms of the funds that you received with that RMS grant itself, you didn't get full funding. The state funds that are 80% of this grant were $1.4 million, and that was for design and construction specifically. And then as part of the grant requirements, there's also a 20% town match, and that's right around $350,000. Now Michelle was able to go out and get a DOLA grant for you guys that covered $220,000 of that match. And then you guys were making up that difference to get to the 350,000. And then on top of that, then because you didn't get the full funds, you guys decided that you guys were going to cover the right-of-way acquisition costs. And at the time, these were estimated at around $208,000. And the way we arrived at that number is you have one permanent easement. I might want to go back really quick. You have one permanent easement that is right east of Mountain Drive. That's at the Vale property. And so permanent easements means you're getting full access to this like forever and ever once you acquire it. So that's a percentage of the property cost based on the square footage. And then you also have all these temporary easements on the west end. So anytime a driveway goes outside of the existing right-of-way for the road, you would need a temporary easement just to tie in for construction. And so those are also a percentage of the property value, but it's a lot less than a permanent easement, right? Because you're just there for construction. And that's how we initially estimated that little piece. So when you add all those together, you had a total budget of 1.9 million-ish. So back in March, when we picked the project back up and finally got under contract, we went back, looked at all of our design for the full extent of the project, and calculated what the estimate would be. And again, this is design, construction, and right-of-way. And we were right at 3.5 million. And so now you're looking at me like, what happened, right? How is it 1.3 million more than what we had? And I'm really glad that we learned about this inflation costs and statistics that CDOT has, because that actually kind of vets what we came up with here. It really is inflation. When we take that 2.2 million and increase it by 25% for the first year and increase it again by 25% the second year, we get right around 3.4 million. So that really is what was driving all the increase in cost for this entire project. Does anyone have any questions here?
So the state funds grant of 80%, can that be applied to the increased costs?
So currently that money that you saw in the previous slide, that is what you have to construct, right? So then the approach is then what do you get with those funds that you have? So the funds are what you have for construction, and there's not any additional right now. However, we are looking at applying for an MMOF funds, which are state funds, to try to cover a little bit more cost and get you a little bit more project. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So our net cost for the project,
This is what you got. So you go from 3590 linear feet down to 923 linear feet. That's it.
So we go to the next slide here.
I'm there.
This highlighted in green, right, is the current funds that you have available. This is what it gets you. Right, so we're trying to maximize your funds as much as possible. You will notice that the estimate here is 1.83 and not 1.96. And that's because you guys were putting up funds for the right-of-way acquisition. And this side of the road only has that one permanent easement at the Vale property, and that one is currently estimated at 80,000. So I took the 1.4 plus the 350,000 and I added 80 and got 1.8 as the funds that you currently have available for the project.
So I'm a little confused. The original project called for sidewalks on both sides of the street, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And with the more limited funds, are with the increased costs, now we can only do, it looks to me like a third of it.
Yes. Yes, that is exactly correct.
So why, if the price went up, I don't think it quite doubled, why can't we build half of it?
Yes, and that was my biggest trepidation was we were going through all of this. So the reason for it is that storm system that we talked about a little bit ago, right? Adding in this pipe and connecting is the most expensive part of the full project. So that's one of the good things here, right? This part that we have highlighted is the most expensive part, and you would get that with the funds that you currently have. Now there are 2 other pipe outfalls, but those are kind of standalone. This first piece of really long linear pipe is connecting to your existing system. And then the other good thing here is that by going and acquiring this permanent easement now, even though the project isn't extending all the way to that piece, you're using current dollars, one, to purchase a permanent easement, so that doesn't go up with inflation. But it also makes the project more attractive to grant funding because you are a true, as they say, shovel-ready project.
Lynn, does that make sense that there's not equal amounts of storm drainage throughout the entire project? Primary storm drainage is on the east side of the road where there's a lot of piping underground, and that is a lot of significant additional costs. Also, you won't be surprised at all that in preliminary drilling, they've already found quite a few large rocks, which we expect will add to the cost of the project as well.
That's already included in the contingency.
And so if we, at some point we do the next, the second stage of it, we wouldn't have to pay for the as expensive storm drains.
That's right. So Celeste, in her next portion of this slide, she'll show you the green section right there is approximately 1.83 million to do that, what I would call small green section. But if Celeste highlights the second half of that section, which gets us to the boneyard, that's where we're going to be applying for the multimodal transportation and mitigation funds through CDOT to finish that side of the road. We expect that side of the road, the orange section, to be around, what, Celeste, $400,000?
Yes, it's around $300 to $400,000, which that I think answers your question. You can see how it's 1.3 for just the green, but then for the rest of it, it's only 300 to 400,000 more.
Right. So we really are having to do the most expensive portion of this phase first.
Any other questions at this point?
You mentioned there was a contingency for in case you run into big rocks. Say that digging gets really easy. Could we use some of that extra money to continue on down the orange phase if there's money left over?
Yes, you could, and that is part of what Michelle and I are coordinating, kind of what that looks like. The hard part there is when you don't know, you can't provide, right, the design limit, if that makes any sense. But yeah, if there are extra funds, we would definitely go through and start building a little bit more. And if I'm trying to remember, to get to the next pipe, doing that whole section, I think it was another 100,000. So if for whatever reason they didn't find a whole lot, then you could get a few more linear feet of sidewalk. And I do have this, and it's really high level because I just took the the length of sidewalk and your total, and I have about $2,000 per linear feet. That is inflated though because of the storm system itself. The more you build, the less it costs, if that makes any sense. So, trying to complete the whole stretch gets you more than trying to do just a few feet. It ends up being more cost effective, right? The more you build.
So at the risk of doing math in public, you're saying we do this phase, it's not going to be another $1.7 million to finish up based on 3.5 for the cumulative cost of the entire project versus 1.8. Also looking at the linear feet breakdown. Question one, linear feet applies to the sidewalk and pipe or just sidewalk?
This is like linear feet along the road, so it's everything that's inclusive in the
So
project.
going from 975 per linear feet to 1983, with a requirement of basically 400 more linear feet of pipe and almost 2,700 feet of sidewalk remaining plus the driveways. So the end question is, we choose to do the green, we're still going to have to shell out at least another 1.7 or more based on time passing and more inflation, correct? To finish this project, either way you slice it.
Um, yes, the inflation continuing to go up is something that is a little bit scary. If I apply another 25% for a third year, right, that 3.5 turns into 4.3. And that's if it kept going that way, right? And who knows? But it would still, if you go and compare, today's dollars with it all, the rest of the project is significantly cheaper than this green section.
Go ahead.
Well, I have two questions on it. I guess first, the inflation, is that based on communications with like pre-bid or giving any sort of 25% per year? I get that inflation's been bad. It hasn't been 25% a year. So is that
That's-
just taking the CDOT estimate and applying that to the project in 2 years?
So yes, CDOT has been taking data from all of their project costs across the board, and they said that they're seeing a 25% year over year rate of inflation.
All
So
of their sidewalk project costs or all of their like bridge and highways and
all of their project costs
across the.
Right. I will say bridges seem to be less expensive.
And then the other question is, how did we decide on the east side versus the west side? Because it's up for debate. Like, I think it seems like there's more houses and about to be a lot more houses on the other side of the street.
The drainage piece, right?
Staff came to council, I don't know, maybe a year ago, maybe more. I'm sorry that I don't remember the exact date where we came to council. We talked about the option of doing one side or the other. It was recommended to do the east side because the goal is to get folks on a sidewalk to the entrance to the boneyard. So if having to choose, it was decided to do the east side of the road.
Where are the crosswalks? There's one at the end of the current sidewalk, but are there any as you go out? So like Mountain Drive and Belden, those will all have.
Celeste, can you point out if we have any crosswalks that are being added in this portion?
I don't think there's any.
So there are no crosswalks going across Main Street through here. No marked crosswalks. Since the last project went through, CDOT has a new method of approving marked sidewalk crossings. So currently that we have the unmarked one across from Boneyard. So where that Boneyard open space connection is, there would be curb ramps there for people to get across Main Street, but it would be an unmarked crossing. They need to have, it's like a chicken and egg thing. They need to have counts of pedestrians crossing the street there before they can approve a marked crossing. Ideally, and what we showed, years ago back in 2016, we were showing the marked crossing with the flashing beacons at that end of the project. But yeah, I think the sidewalk and the curb would have to go in first, and then you'd have to get pedestrian counts, and then hopefully then come back and get it marked with flashing beacons.
Okay.
All right. Good news all around.
So I do have one other slide just to kind of show you just a typical section, right? So cutting across US 24, what is it that you're getting with this project? And like I said, very similar to what you had in phase one. So your existing pavement is really where those three through lanes are. CDOT for this part of the project has changed their minds on lane widths, and they have approved 11-foot lanes. So we're showing an 11-foot lane there on the east side going into town. And then the 8-foot parking. So that parking part is where we start widening. So we have this full depth pavement, which did get a little bit thicker from before, based on CDOT's recommendations. So we've included that additional cost in all the numbers and figures that you've seen before. Then you've got your curb and gutter, you've got your 6-foot sidewalk, and then you're tying in, and then obviously not shown on here, you also have your storm pipe under there as needed.
Just curious, the through lanes, you have the east side is only 11 feet and the west side 12 feet. And why not have 11 and a half and 12, 11 and a half on both sides?
Yeah, so we're not restriping the other side. The other side is just staying as is. It would get restriped once the other side of the project moves through, and we would hope that CDOT would allow us to keep 11-foot lanes throughout. That way you guys can really get some of that traffic calming and slow down in safety through here. But because we're only touching that one end, that's the only stripe that we're planning on repainting.
So we're putting sidewalks on the east side of the road so we can narrow down that side and make 11-foot lanes, but there's no sidewalks going in on the west side of the road, so it remains 12 feet until we do sidewalks on that side.
And just to clarify, I wasn't looking at the numbers before. So we're getting a quarter of the sidewalk from the original proposal and about 60% of the storm pipes installed. Right,
Yes, I don't have exact percentages of the pipe, but yes.
okay. Right.
Are there deadlines on the various grant funding?
The MMOF is, so we go to add, what, December this goes to add?
We are planning on the first week of December for advertisement. Yes.
So we can still apply for grants up until before, we can't apply once money starts getting spent, that's not reimbursable. So we can apply up until before we are breaking ground, so next spring. So we'll continue to see what we can find out there to add to this. Our goal remains to continue to build as much sidewalk as we can with the funding that we have. So as we bring more money in, we'll build more sidewalks.
Sorry.
Other
Any other
questions?
questions for Celeste?
Celeste, thank you so much for presenting tonight.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
your
much
time.
for having me and for the opportunity to work on this project. I will keep looking for ways to maximize your funds as much as possible, and I'm really excited to see this project through.
Yes, we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we have another presentation from the Regional Housing Needs Assessment from Patty Lynn
Sort of.
or Gina.
Good evening, Town Council. My name is Jenna Skinner. I'm the planning manager for the town of Avon. I am pinch hitting for Patty, who has a conflict tonight. Patty is our housing planner that we had hired about a year ago now, and she's moving and shaking with all things housing. Tonight we have Rachel Shinman here. She is the vice president of EPS, which is Economic and Planning Systems. They are working. They were chosen consultants to be working on this housing needs assessment. The last needs assessment we did was about 2018, so this is an update and probably more informative than we've ever had. Luckily, they had done the last one, I believe, as well. And so Rachel is an economist and a planner who is all about this data that we're putting together for you for a final presentation, and this is the tour that's going around to all the different jurisdictions. It's very enlightening. You will be not surprised by some things and very surprised by other information that she will be presenting. And I'm going to keep it short in the essence of time, but it's good to be back in Minturn, and thank you for having us. And Rachel, if you want to come on up.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I've never had this like live view of what the screen sharing looks like. I was very worried it always like goes to the presenter view, so that worked. So, like was mentioned, my name is Rachel. I work for Economic and Planning Systems. We're based in Denver. We've been around for a couple decades working up here in the mountains around Colorado and nationally on a whole host of land economics issues, but housing and affordable housing and mountain resort affordable housing is one of our specialties, I guess you'd call it, for better or for worse. The work keeps coming. So like was mentioned, I'm here to present initial data from the regional housing needs study, so spearheaded by the county and then all of the municipalities as partners. So looking at needs at a regional level, and then in the next piece of this, starting to look at strategies at a local level, understanding that, you know, the county functions very much as a region in terms of jobs and housing, but we also need our local, you know, the county doesn't make decisions for local governments. And so how do we enable local governments to have the right data to help understand what needs to be done locally to collectively look at housing issues? So I'm going to run through some initial findings we put together. The most extensive slideshow I've ever put together, which is really the framework of the final written report that you'll all be getting. It's what I think technically we would call a data dump. But it's all of our initial findings, and then we put together a summary of the key points here, really looking to get initial feedback, you know, what's surprising, what's not surprising, what else do you want to see, because we still have time in the process, right? We don't want to come at the end and say, well, here's all the answers, and you're like, well, I haven't seen any of this yet. So this is really a time for those questions, discussion, and then starting to think about roles and opportunities and challenges. I was in Red Cliff last night, and that's like a very distinct context in the region. And then talking to the metro districts and other local organizations this afternoon, speaking with the BOCC last week, and I'm doing the tour, but everyone has different resources and different roles, and we're looking at how we sort of collectively address all of this. So as I run through the data, some of it is presented at municipality level, some of it we've looked at in these sub areas in terms of the Upper Valley, Mid Valley, Down Valley. So the Upper Valley is Vail and then Minturn and Red Cliff and kind of the Highway 24 corridor. And so some of the numbers are definitely skewed by Vail. This is geographic as well as market. But where possible, we also break out municipalities, and then in the report there will be detailed breakouts. And then this is just an overview of some sort of general characteristics by location that we saw in it. It really speaks to the character of the different communities in our region, and where everyone is sort of based and coming from, and where we are now, and that helps inform where we might want to go. So we'll start working through demographic and economic and employment trends. We'll talk about the housing market. We'll talk about affordability. We'll talk about outreach. We're going to do that all in like 15 minutes. See how fast I talk. So we always start with population. In general, the population of the county has been growing slowly, so about 0.5% a year since 2010 till 2022. If we look within the county, though, the growth has not been even. And so we're seeing much higher growth in our Down Valley communities, and actually some decline in the Upper Valley. I would caution that a decline of 2 people over 12 years, we're going to call that a stable community. I cannot guarantee that this community has lost exactly 2 people over 12 years. There's definitely a margin of error on these estimates. 2010 is the census, and then other years are estimates from that. We have been working with, as I'm sure you're all aware, in small communities, data is challenging. And then the 2020 census was particularly challenging. And so we did a really robust community survey with our partners at RRC Associates to help supplement some of our secondary data sources to really get accurate and up-to-date data of what's happening in the community. So the next question is, who is living in our communities? And as we see at the state level and at the national level and in a lot of countries, the population is aging, right? We had a big cohort in the baby boom. They're getting older. Successive generations are not as big. And so this is something that's not a surprise, but it does impact housing. It impacts housing needs. It impacts housing choices. And as we'll talk about, one of the goals of this effort is to try and build a housing continuum in the county where people can have choice and move throughout different housing typologies. And one of those moves is often the ability to downsize and stay in the community. And right now that's a really big challenge for a lot of people. So another piece of who's living in the community is what we call household type. And so the census and demographers split households into what we call family households and non-family households. So related people and unrelated people living together. And this tracks with what we see in those community characteristics of as we move further down valley, we have a greater share of family households. And that makes sense. Housing is, I'm not going to say more affordable, but less expensive down valley. There are larger homes, there's yards, if you want to put a swing set in the yard for kids to play, there's more space available. And so this makes sense with what we know about our communities in the valley. So then what do our housing units look like? And so we've seen housing growth in the county since 2010 as well at a faster rate than population, which is not unexpected for a resort and visitation-based community. And what's interesting is that even our communities that have lost population or stayed about stable are adding housing units. This shows that we've added 43 housing units since 2010. I think building permit data shows about 28 since 2015. So depending on years and where we get our data, we see different numbers, but overall we still see growth concentrated in the mid-valley and down valley communities, and then in the unincorporated area as well. So the next question, particularly in our mountain communities, is how many of these homes actually have people living in them? And so overall in the county, we have about a 60% occupancy rate. So that means 40% of homes overall in the county are vacant. So second homes, vacation rentals, things like that. And this also differs dramatically throughout the valley. So in Vail, only a third of homes are occupied, whereas in Gypsum, it's over 90%. And so that sort of tracks again with more family households and more population growth. There's been an interesting shift in Minturn. If you look at 2010, 80% of housing units were occupied. And in 2022, that was, it's blacked on my screen, but I think is close to 70%. Yeah, I'm due for an eye doctor appointment. This is a good reminder. But so we're seeing some of these changes, and we're seeing the pressure come further down the valley, right? If we look at Avon as well, we're seeing some of these changes. So the next question when we talk about housing is, well, how much money do people have? Because that's a key part of how much people can pay for housing. So this is census income data. We also ask questions about income on our survey. And so the median household income in the county, right, half of households earn more, half of households earn less, is about $100,000. This varies by the size of the household, which relates to the size of the housing unit that someone would be looking for. And I'll point out a couple times where there are some things in the data that make us go, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So one-person households earning about $43,000, as we'll see when we get to the market and affordability metrics. $43,000 does not get you much of anything in this county if you're looking for housing. And so who these one-person households are, that's a question that we have of this data. We also know that there's a lot of employer-provided housing, and so that might be where a lot of these sort of single-person households are located.
On that stat sheet, I noticed that Minturn has the highest median income in the county.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me, but that could very well be.
Okay.
Where you have Minturn and Eagle ahead of Vail and Edwards, and just intuitively that doesn't make sense.
Lives in Vail, so
Right, it's
somewhere else.
the income metrics are based on people who live there, and so and we'll see in the market data, there's a very big difference in terms of who might own real estate there versus who completes their census there.
Marketing pitch. Minturn, richest town in Eagle County.
That's the marketing you could get behind.
That's keeping us from getting grants for
Yeah.
I
lunch.
know.
I mean,
Yeah.
looking at Edwards versus Minturn, that's the same percentage of non-occupied homes. So it just surprises me.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of this is what pieces of the data are surprising, because there's a good chance that they're accurate and we want to just understand what's underlying them. But there's also sometimes the data just, as we start to ask some more questions of it, we bring in another data source and we can add some context to it about why or what or when things may have changed. So these are good questions to ask. Another piece that we look at in terms of income, particularly in resort communities, is where people's income is coming from. And so the Bureau of Economic Analysis publishes this data source that takes total household income. So this isn't on a per household basis, but this is all income earned by people living in the county thrown into a bucket and then divided into these three categories. So we have wage and salary, which is you work a job, you get a paycheck, that's wage and salary income. Investment income, which is real estate, stocks, bonds, anything investments, and then transfer receipts, which is typically government programs. And so what we can see is that there's been this shift in where the population's income is coming from 2010 through 2022, and a decrease in the percentage of income from wage and salary, and an increase from investments. So that's a change in where people get their money can be related to how much money they're getting, which is related to how much they can pay for housing. And so it's an increasing disconnect between the local housing market and local jobs and wages. And so that's one of the things that it starts to paint the picture from the data. Another thing that just makes us go, is that the population is aging, but we don't see an increase in the percentage of income from transfer receipts, which we would often see with an aging population as people start drawing on Social Security and other government programs. So I don't have an answer for why, it's just interesting.
But would that reflect the investment income? So
It might, where people just are relying much more on other sources of income.
Real estate.
Right. So we also know that employment is very directly tied to housing demand. And so we always want to look at employment in the county to understand how things are changing and what jobs exist. So overall, the county has about 34,000 jobs. And then in addition to that, about 30% of employment is proprietors. So people who own their own business, run something out of their home, what have you. So that 34,000 is only 70% of employment. And we've seen about 24% job growth since 2010. Our core sectors are what we would expect in a resort and tourism-based community. So accommodation and food, retail, construction, arts, entertainment, and recreation. That's going to be our mountain jobs. And then, summer recreation as well. Those have stayed as the biggest employment sectors, but what's interesting is that the growth is happening mostly in healthcare, and then this fun category called administrative and waste services, which is sort of there. We don't know where else to put it in this category, but that's landscaping services, commercial property management, a lot of jobs like that, and that's really where the growth is happening. What's interesting too is that a lot of those are year-round jobs. And so while there's still definitely a seasonal economy in the county, what we're seeing is that the seasonality is lessening. There's more year-round employment, and our shoulder seasons are really just October and May now. So it's not really a season, it's more like shoulder month. The employment still definitely peaks in the winter, and there's definitely also a summer peak, but the magnitude between the peak and valley is decreasing. And then another piece of this is where are the people who fill these jobs coming from? And so commuting data is challenging to get, but right now we're looking at about half of employees commuting in from outside the county. Some of that's by choice, and some of that is not. And so part of what we're looking at in terms of housing needs is how many people would want to live here if the housing was available, and how can we work to help make that happen? That makes for typically happier employees, more stable employees, safer when you're not driving over mountain passes in the winter to get to work. It also depends where you live. We'll talk about the outreach, but we've been doing interviews with commuters, and so someone commuting from just over the county line, living in Lake County, can have the same or a shorter commute as someone living in Gypsum. And so it's also a matter of choice and where people want to live, but if you're living in Gypsum, you're driving I-70. So a little different nature of the commute. But commuting is a big factor as well.
is that data is that just math of like, there's this many jobs, this many people living there, or are you actually saying like this many people from Leadville are driving into Eagle County on a daily basis?
So the 50% number there's a census data source that looks at home location and work location. It's okay, but it's been pretty consistent. Like I looked at 4 different years going back to I think 2010. It was pretty consistently about 50%. So when we start to see that consistency in the data, then we're like, okay. We asked on the survey, we tried to reach out to commuters. It was pretty hard to get them. And then we also did an employer survey and asked them if they know how many of their employees are commuting from other places. So we have a couple of different data points to work on. The location piece is hard because it can include remote workers, and then also like not all of these employees are here like 5 days a week, 6 days a week. Like we've been talking to people who might come up once a week or once a month or once a quarter and work remotely the rest of the time. So there's a lot of nuance in that data. But what we do know is that a lot of jobs that are located in the county are not being filled by people who live here full time. So when we start to think about people holding jobs locally and what they can afford for housing, we're looking at wages, right? We looked at household income before. That's all earners, all sources of income. So if you have a household with 2 people working and they each have 3 jobs, all 6 of those wages would go into the household income. So we also look at wages to understand if, let's say people only had to work 1 or 2 jobs, then what could they afford? And we look at it by occupation. If we look at it by industry, which is what we looked at on the previous slide, it takes every type of job within that. So from someone working a janitorial job to somebody working as an accountant or a lawyer within a company. And so our average gets muddied a little bit. So what we do is we look at these occupations, which these are the top 10 occupations in the county. And if you look at 17,000 jobs, that accounts for about half of all jobs in the county are in these occupations. And the median wage in 6 out of the 10 is $50,000 or below. So we have a lot of low paying jobs in the county. So the next piece is what's going on in the housing market. In case you haven't noticed, the market has accelerated. I don't think I'm going to tell you anything you don't know in this, but sometimes it helps to see it. So 2019 was a bit of an inflection point, from 2019 to 2020. So from 2015 through 2019, prices countywide were growing at about 3% a year, which is like a pretty healthy increase. Since 2019, they've been growing at almost 16% per year. That is fast. There are 2 communities in the county with a median sale price of under $1 million. So if you want a house, median, half or more, half or less, but for under $1 million, you're looking in Redcliffe or Gypsum. Everywhere else, the median sale price is over $1 million. And the median price in the county has more than doubled since 2015. So the next question is, well, we have a lot of really big single-family homes in the county that are not intended to be locals housing. No one's going to argue that. They are big ski houses. What about our condos and our townhomes? They're still expensive. And those prices have doubled or more than doubled since 2019. So we can really see the impacts of, the mountain migration and COVID on these numbers, where the median sale price for any type of home in the county is now over $1 million. And condos and townhomes have seen the most drastic increases. And then one note on all of the sale data, we're excluding, so we got all sales in the county. We're excluding the top and bottom 5% to take out those outliers, or just not necessarily outliers, but like really expensive homes or things that are done on like a transfer, and then excluding mobile homes and ranches to try and just get sort of core homes in the community. We also look at the rental market. Rental data, so commuting data is hard to get. Rental data is the hardest data to get. So we're looking at the census, we're looking at our survey, and then we're also talking to people. And so for our affordability analysis right now, we're using the census median rent of about $1,900. We're working on additional analysis looking at per bedroom rent, which we're hearing is between $1,500 and $2,000 per bedroom. And we're hearing that pretty consistently. We've also heard that to rent a couch is between $800 to $1,000. That doesn't guarantee access to a kitchen. That's just a place to put your head at night. And people can be paying $1,000 for that. So what does that mean in terms of actually getting housing in the county? So looking at rental, and again, this is looking at affording that median rent from the census in these communities. Keep in mind that that's, if I've been living in a rental unit for 10 years and my landlord has not really raised my rent, that's the rent I'm going to report on the census. So it doesn't necessarily reflect current market conditions of if I were to try to rent a unit right now, what would it cost? So just keeping that caveat in mind. That said, there is no community in the county where one person can live on their own affordably, earning the median income or median wage and paying the median rent. So we're seeing a lot of doubling, tripling up, people having to live with roommates to make it work to afford housing.
Yeah, I was just noticing too, with Minturn from 2015 to 2022, We have the highest percentage increase in rates, in rental rates at 9.6%.
Yeah, on that rental side. And that 2022 also is not a point in time, that's a 5-year estimate, so that captures survey responses from 2018 through 2022. So current conditions are probably worse. But also depending on how often there's unit turnover, and how often rents are raised. We did a lot of outreach to like locally based property owner landlords who just have their own small portfolio, and they're much more likely to have local tenants in there and just say, I have a local in there, I'm providing locals housing. I bought this unit 10, 20 years ago, so my mortgage is not based on current prices and current interest rates, so I can keep the rent affordable, so I'm gonna do that. A lot of our affordable rental inventory is relying on the goodness of people's hearts, which I'm really glad that they're doing that. It's not necessarily great policy. So understand that this is where we're trying to understand the different components of the market and where are these pockets of affordability. And as we'll get to, talking about preservation as a key strategy, right? We're not just looking at like building new housing. That's definitely a piece of it, but we also need to preserve the housing that we have and keep it available and keep it accessible. When we look at affordability of homeownership, also bad, and we know that homeownership is a stabilizing factor for people. And so we'll get to some highlights from the survey that we did. We asked people about how stable do you feel in your current housing, and the people who were feeling the most instability were renters, which makes sense. Your rent can go up every year. You don't know what will happen. And so that's where home ownership can really help stabilize people in the community, help them put down roots and keep them here, have a family, have that community that we want here. That said, in 2023, 24 homes sold that were affordable to a 2-person household at 100% AMI. Also keep in mind that the home sale prices don't account for quality. So they might have been affordable at a base level, but still needed $100,000 worth of work. That's not accounted for in these numbers. We also looked at, we took out what we're calling like the resort areas. So like locals are not going to buy, you might buy a house in Beaver Creek, but like that's not an expectation of this. Like there are areas that were purpose built as sort of ski home areas, right? Gated communities, buildings with like front desks and ski shuttles. So taking those areas out, there is still a massive affordability gap. So the income needed to afford the median priced home is still 2 to 3 times higher than the median income, even when we take out a lot of that high end. We still don't get down far enough. And so this is just looking at by community, looking at that median wage of about $50,000 and how many jobs you would need to work at that median wage to afford the median house in any of these communities. And so to get the median home in gypsum, you have to work just under 4 jobs or have essentially just under $200,000 of income, and it gets worse from there. And so that's where we see people buying a home and getting roommates, or we see people, in the focus groups we did, we were talking to a lot of people with families where they were living in one room. We see a lot of overcrowding, and that does not show up in the data. That shows up, we find that out when we talk to people, and so I just want to shout out Habitat for Humanity, who is a partner on this project and really brought these people in to share their experiences. There's a lot of overcrowding of people just trying to make it work in the community. And it's definitely gotten worse. And so if you think back to our middle school math class, of the slope of a line is the rate of change, that slope changed a lot in 2019. And so things are they got a lot worse a lot faster. And so that affordability gap in terms of home ownership just keeps getting bigger. And so the challenge just keeps getting bigger. it also means that there's more competition for those lower priced units. And so anytime a lower priced unit comes up for sale, there's, you know, the same population of people is trying to access a smaller pool of units. So the last piece of this was outreach, and I've alluded to some of it already. So the data is obviously the base of it, but we know that the data doesn't tell us the whole story. So we did a big survey, which hopefully you all filled out as well. We had immensely rich responses. We could have spent literally a whole month just digging through the survey results. We have some highlights here in the extended packet. There's a lot more. There's going to be a whole chapter in the report of the survey findings. And then we also conducted interviews and the focus groups that I mentioned. And so a couple key themes that came up. One, I mentioned this before, the security of housing. And so this is where we can see, we took this survey results and we came up with these like resident profiles. And young renters, people living with roommates, and people living in employer provided housing feel the most housing instability, which makes sense given what we know just about that would probably track in any community. Renting is inherently less stable than owning, and living in housing that is tied to your employment can be unstable or can feel unstable. We also asked people how easy or difficult was it to find housing. And so it was difficult for a lot of people. There's a lot of colors on this, but it was difficult for a lot of people, particularly for people who currently live in deed-restricted housing. So finding that deed-restricted housing and getting into it was reported as a big challenge. People living in rental housing and living with roommates, and the Hispanic and Latino population. And you can see even, you know, families with young children, still over 50%. A lot of people found it very difficult to find housing. And then another component of this is cost burden. So we know that, like we said, there are a lot of lower paying jobs in the county. We know that people are working multiple jobs, but how much of people's income are they spending on housing? Industry standard nationally is if you're paying over 30% of your gross income on housing, you're considered cost burdened. If you're spending over 50%, you're considered severely cost burdened. And we can see that particularly the Hispanic and Latino population is spending a lot of their income on housing. And then also our renters, and then that high percentage in employer provided housing is interesting and a little concerning because that should be subsidized. So the last piece is we also reached out to employers, in thinking about, as we start thinking about strategies and partners, employers can be really big partners in this effort. They're on the front lines of this. I think if you talk to almost any business in the county and ask them, do you have open positions and how hard is it to hire? They're going to say yes and very. And so we asked about that, and a lot of people said that it has gotten harder to recruit and retain employees, and housing is a big part of that. And these challenges tend to increase with the size of the employer. So our biggest employers are feeling the biggest challenges. There's definitely a noticeable decrease in employers with fewer than 5 employees. Still 44% of them say that it's gotten harder to recruit and retain, but that's the lowest percentage of any category. And then slightly less challenging Dale Valley, but when 75% of people are saying it's a challenge, when I call that not challenging. So that was a very high level overview of a lot of analysis and input and feedback. And so we're still working on this. That's part of why we're here right now, is to get this. We're probably at about 75% right now. But to get feedback, ask questions, what else you might want to see. We're still working on the gaps and needs analysis. And so that's what is our target? How much housing do we need to do our catch up, which is what needs are we not currently meeting? And then our keep up, how much are we expected to grow and how much housing do we need for that? And then this strategy piece. And so again, we're looking at needs regionally, but throughout this whole process, we've been trying to understand what that looks like on the ground, because as we've seen, the county is not a monolith. And so we can't just say, well, the county needs this, because there's a lot of very different communities throughout the county. And so especially as we start to think about strategies, starting to think about needs and opportunities and challenges. So for example, when I was in Red Cliff yesterday, we talked about, it's probably not going to be a whole lot of new development in Red Cliff. there's not a whole lot of space for new development, but there are a lot of older homes there, and we've seen they're more affordable than other communities, but older homes need a lot of work. And if people are looking to buy in Red Cliff because it's more affordable, chances are they don't have $100,000 to put into an older home. And so how do we look at finding and connecting people to resources for things like rehab, and working on that preservation piece of preserving our existing housing stock and keeping it accessible for our local community? And then where do we also look at new development? Where do we look at different programs? Where do we look at different challenges like insurance costs when wildfire maps were redrawn and our whole county is a high fire risk area, and the insurance companies are looking at that. And so what's that doing? And for a lot of our older condo buildings that are wood construction and don't have sprinklers, a lot of them are functionally uninsurable right now. And so they're paying a lot of money to get bad insurance on the secondary market because they need that for people's mortgages. But if they were to retrofit the buildings with sprinklers, that would get them lower insurance rates and better insurance, but that's a cost prohibitive project. And so where can we identify needs and then start to identify resources and start to look at housing needs in diverse and holistic ways, and not just how many units do we need. That's a big part of it, but also what else are the needs and how do we address overcrowding and how do we address all of these other challenges. So we're working on finalizing all of this, and then I'll be back doing another roadshow early in the new year with the final report. But really wanted to get reactions, questions, thoughts, ideas, anything that pops into mind or that you want to make sure is considered as we move forward in this process.
Can you parse out of the data like people that, I'm just gonna hold on because this is not a formed thought yet. Just let me work on that one for a while.
Well, I think what you're doing is really important. It's kind of frightening, but it is reality. I think we're very grateful for you for doing this.
I don't know how realistic it is, since the data in regards to income and some of those other valuations obviously comes from census predominantly. But in light of how much this town has to pursue alternative funding sources for infrastructure, et cetera, how in the world, for example, Vail, considering, or Avon, Beaver Creek area, 75% plus second homeowners, how has it ever been illustrated elsewhere to show the vast disparity in income to more accurately present to Fed, state, whatever? Oh, by the way, these are primary homeowners as well. What's out there that's a tool to be able to do that, or is there anything?
In terms of like incomes in the community?
Basically saying Vail is a whole lot more money per household than what's reflected here. Minturn is not the richest town in all of Eagle County.
Yeah, and I think that's where caveating the data comes into play. And so there's the people who are living in Vail, right? We know they're living 30% of the housing units. We know a lot of people living in Vail are living in subsidized housing units. And so that shapes who is living there. Like there's this huge gap of you're either, and in a lot of the county, you're either living in subsidized housing or you need to make a whole lot of money to live in market rate housing. But another thing that we'll be doing is looking at the distribution of households by income. Some of that just isn't available for smaller places, but that also helps show just more nuanced what the population looks like. And then also, like we asked income data on the survey, so we can draw from that as well. Yeah, just pulling from multiple data sources and then caveating where we know that there are limitations or there's other factors influencing it, right? So like the population in Vail is, yeah, it's just like a certain subset of residents are going to be living in Vail. And that's going to impact the data. And so that might impact a lower median income because, you know, a lot of those really expensive homes are not occupied year round. And so that those homeowners' income is not reflected in Vail, it's reflected in wherever their primary residence is.
One thing I noticed that was sort of interesting is that in the change in Minturn in terms of how many houses are owner occupied, that was a very significant change from from 2010 until 2023. I hadn't realized that.
I'm tracking what you're saying. What I'm driving at is an alternative way that's accepted by those entities to, for example, I'm not gonna look at the data, but we'll say Minturn, primary homeowners represents 90% of the population of Minturn. Average mean income is what you put right there. However, in the town of Vail, again, not valid numbers, 75% of the residents in Vail are second homes. We do not have income data for those homes. However, those homes' average mean valuation is $6.5 million. So that would correlate to a vast difference in income disparity. And again, just driving at how we can present that is accepted by the entities that basically have pocketbooks.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that there's a lot of purposes of the study and outcomes of the study, but one of those is to provide the data needed for things like grant applications and getting funding. And so we're trying to the extent that we can, where we know what some of those nuances are, and especially for things like Prop 123, to try and make sure that as much of that information as possible is embedded within this report so that it's just there and sort of ready for that next step.
Yeah, the amount of data you mined is pretty overwhelming. I spent an hour.
We do that.
I spent an hour and a half, and that's got me about 5% there. So this is going to take a little bit of thought. But have y'all, just looking at the affordable housing problem, are there resort communities throughout the country that have had these kind of issues? Have y'all gone out and looked to see how they addressed them and so forth?
Yeah, so we work in most of them. So we worked here for a long time in Roaring Fork Valley, Telluride, San Miguel County, Steamboat, Crested Butte, Jackson, and then our California offices work in a lot of the California resorts. Nobody's figured it out. A lot of communities have really good ideas, and a lot of communities are really good at taking other communities' really good ideas. So, for example, the buy down program, like Vail and Deed, Mikasa, Good Deeds, that is a model that's being taken by a lot of communities now. Breckenridge did Housing Helps, and giving people money to not short-term rent their unit and long-term rent it instead. Ketchum, Idaho, where Sun Valley is starting to do that. And so there's a lot of idea sharing, a lot of different good ideas that are coming out of different communities. I can't say that anyone's figured it out. It also just depends on state and local political context, like statutory limitations, all of that. So different communities are able to do different things. Aspen's probably been doing it the longest. Vail's probably been doing it the second longest, like the, Eagle River Valley. So there's a lot of historical knowledge and an understanding of what's worked and what we've improved on. There's no silver bullet. I wish there was. I would happily be put out of work in this line of work if I could figure out what it was. But there's lots of things to learn from other communities, and we definitely look to peer communities for ideas and lessons learned.
Are there other communities you can think of that are like ski area adjacent, right? Like Minturn doesn't necessarily benefit from, Vail gets a boatload of money from everybody that comes to Vail,
Yeah.
and Minturn doesn't.
Yeah, so that's, a lot of these communities are in similar sort of valleys or like commute sheds. So if we think about like the Roaring Fork Valley, what like Carbondale gets is very different. It's related and it's sort of downstream, but it's not what Aspen gets. And that's where taking this regional approach helps, because we know that the need is being felt throughout the valley. Resources are different in different communities, and the need is being generated to a different extent in different communities. And capacity is different in different communities. And so how do we understand the need regionally, understand resources and capacity and all of those other factors, and come up with a strategy that addresses the need, working within the constraints of all the communities. And part of that is how communities want to grow, right? We have comprehensive plans, we have other plans that outline how we all want to grow as a community, and it's not necessarily taking 50% of the housing need of the county into our community. So looking at how that all plays out, because a lot of times the need generators are mostly built out, and development costs are highest in those communities because they're generating the need. And so that's where the regional approach is really, really helpful, to be able to take that high level view and then go back down to like the 3-foot view when we start looking at strategies and implementation.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay.
It was a lot.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank
Very
you.
informative. We'll be in touch.
Yes. And I'll be back.
It's just a theme of good news.
Yeah.
Sidewalk, no houses. What's next? Are we gonna have
we
public
getting
lands taken away? Eagle Valley Land Trust.
Yeah.
Speaking of Eagle Valley Land Trust, they are next. Jessica,
Here.
come on up.
Hello, I am Carrie Inoue. I am the Community Engagement Manager with Eagle Valley Land Trust. I believe I have a presentation queued up. If not, hopefully it's in everyone's packets.
He's working on it.
But Eagle Valley Land Trust, we are your local land conservation nonprofit. We're working in Eagle County and the surrounding areas to permanently protect land for the benefit of humans and wildlife. So I have a very short presentation, hopefully a little bit more cheerful and uplifting. Yeah, not sure if we have slides. If not, I can go from memory.
Hang on, we'll probably have it in just a second.
Okay.
Right, Jay?
He drifted off, it happens.
Wake up, Jay. There we go.
Great, thank you so much. And we can advance to the next slide, actually. So Eagle Valley Land Trust, we have 4 main focus areas. The big one, of course, is land conservation. We've protected over 14,000 acres across Eagle County and surrounding areas. That's through 38 conservation easements. So these are properties that have permanent legal protection against future development. We also have 1 property that was transferred to federal ownership. That was Sweetwater Lake. So our team also conducts annual monitoring of each of those 38 properties, and we provide resources to landowners and land managers. We also engage in stewardship projects to bring community volunteers out onto the land so they can help with things like habitat restoration, barbed wire removal, projects like that. Community engagement, that is my focus area. This is all about the programs and outreach that we do to engage residents and visitors, help them connect to conserved lands. We also engage in advocacy efforts on a local and regional level. Next slide, please. So we work to protect 4 conservation values. These are public recreation and education, scenic beauty, wildlife habitat, and agricultural heritage. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight the conservation easement that we have here in Minturn, which is of course Minturn Boneyard, owned and managed by Town of Minturn, and has been permanently protected through a conservation easement since 2018. It's about 4.4 acres, and it offers public recreation and education, as well as scenic open space. Next slide, please. So I've done a few programs at Minturn Boneyard this year. Most of them are through our future conservationist programs. So these are when we meet with groups of youth of all different ages out on a conserved property and engage them in creative play, exploration, environmental education, stewardship, just to spark that appreciation for the land and also a sense of stewardship responsibility. So this is a nature art activity that I did this summer with summer camp students with Youth Power 365. We partner with a lot of different nonprofits, a lot of government agencies all across the valley. I love partnering with Youth Power 365, so we have the kids explore the property, find the thing that they love the most about it, draw a picture, and then we use that as a starter for conversation. So I think this young man drew a picture of like the wildflowers because we happened to be there right when wildflowers were popping. Next slide, please. So we are always looking for opportunities to partner with Town of Minturn, with residents. This can be through conservation easements. We do these on public and private land. We can also be a support in land acquisition projects. Stewardship projects, as I mentioned, we have worked a lot with public landowners and land managers, but we are expanding our stewardship program to include private large-scale landowners as well. And then community engagement, I'm always looking for opportunities to broaden and deepen the types of programs that we offer to our community members and visitors. Next slide, please. And as an organization, Eagle Valley Land Trust has set a goal to double conservation over the next 10 years. We will accomplish this by in 3 ways. One is doubling engagement, so expanding our outreach, having more diverse program offerings that better reflect the needs and interests of the community that we serve. We will be doubling resources, so making more resources available to landowners. That can also mean funding more conservation easement transactions. And then doubling strategies. We recognize that conservation easements, while they are a phenomenal tool and a very important one, they may not be the best solution for every situation. So we are committed to creating and implementing new tools as part of our doubling conservation goal over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. And that is all for me. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you for your ongoing support, and we're looking forward to future collaborations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessica.
Carrie. Her name's Carrie.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's Mary. That's Bill over there. Who are you? Exactly.
Why Jessica was in here. She's sorry about that, Carrie. Hope the next time we'll try to get you earlier on the agenda instead
No,
of having
that's
this
okay.
one
I
in
learned
front
a
of
lot.
you.
It's very educational for me.
Okay. So next we have business items. Resolution 59, Series 2024, a resolution approving a managed services agreement with Muni Billing.
Yes, just one moment, please, while Jay makes his way downstairs to discuss this matter in person.
Live, in the flesh.
In person.
Yes.
Who are you?
Hi, guys.
Name tags.
What?
Fix the name tags. There you go.
Excuse me. So the first thing we're going to look at is Resolution 59. In the packet, there's a memo. I did one memo for both resolutions because they're tied together pretty intricately. The first, what we're looking at doing is switching from our current system where Eagle River Water and Sanitation is, excuse me, I ran downstairs.
Downstairs, that should not win.
He ran, he said he ran.
It's gonna make you go to the fitness center now.
No, it's so, Eagle River has been running our billing system for decades. They really have. And it's gotten to the point where they've changed and we've changed a little bit, so it's not working as cohesively as it used to. What these two what these two resolutions will do, the first one will move us to a managed billing system. We will have, with that, we will still continue with the same meters that we've got, which was pretty ideal since we just switched out $300,000 worth of meters. This will include buying a new tower, the radio tower that goes on top of the tank. My understanding of this tower, and I haven't physically looked at it, but it basically sits on top of the water tank and it looks like a little PVC pipe. And it literally reads all of the meters in the town at the push of a button. And by doing that, then we can go ahead, and for example, at this last read that we did with Eagle River, we didn't have any no reads. But if we do, we can go out and hand read them, whether we do another drive-by or a touchpad or something like that. Then we'll download the data to this new company, Muni Billing, and they will send out the bills. They'll collect the money and that kind of thing. The really neat part about this new project proposal that we're looking at is that in the future, I'm not saying let's do it now because I want to make sure everything's working before we do this kind of thing, but we could actually bring it all in-house, or we could leave it as a managed service the way it is. The cost for Eagle River has been going up significantly each year, to the point where this change will actually, I am predicting will cost less than what we're going to pay next year alone for Eagle River. This will allow everybody to be able to get a high water notice if they have a leak or something and they're using an excessive amount of water, and that excessive amount could just be higher than your average use is more what I'm thinking. You'll be able to go in and look on a daily basis what you're using. You'll be able to go in and pay your bill online. It'll work the same way. It'll just be easier to see. The second portion of it is this lease agreement with, and it's a lease purchase with Spectrum Lease. And what that is the hardware of the tower, the interface between the meters and the radio tower that allows us to get the data off of the meters. And so it's two resolutions, but it's kind of like last night's election. If you don't pass one, you're not going to pass, the other one doesn't matter. So we need both.
Too soon.
Okay.
I love your analogies.
See that in there?
Apparently Michelle doesn't.
I just have a question. Do we know, does this company have a good track record? Are their customers happy?
That's one of the things that I was really careful about, is because we are a small town. You know everybody, and everybody calls me and yells at me if they have a problem. So, yes, they do. They work with, it's a company out of South Carolina, and they deal with very, very small companies that are very, very small municipality and districts that they literally go out and write it down on a piece of paper and take their meter reads and enter it in, all the way up to major cities. They've not had any, I really did a lot of background on it and tried to see if they'd had any issues. I've called a couple of the companies, the municipalities that they work with, and they're all like, you need to do this. We also, the other way I looked at it is I checked out about a total of about 6 or 7 or 8 companies. Some of them, Eagle River had given us the name, and they were more designed for the large organizations, and that was just gonna be more than we needed, and it was gonna cost a lot more. The problem, the biggest issue I've had lately, or doing this, has actually been with the meter reading itself. They were slow to get back everything, but I think we're on a good track record now with it. I'm gonna be meeting on the phone with them tomorrow. I've got 3 or 4 meetings regarding this tomorrow. One of them is with Eagle River, one of them is with, and one with each of the companies.
What's the annual fee we're paying Eagle River right now, roughly?
I'm sorry?
The annual fee. So right here, looking at muni billing, I'm sorry.
$34.13 a month.
Right, so muni billing is roughly $1,000 less a month.
Right.
Okay.
They handle the trash bill.
The trash bill will be on that also. We have a kind of town-wide trash system where I get a bill that's, $10,000. The town does, and I pay that, and then each household pays $35 a month.
And what's gonna be the differential in total labor on staff? 0?
I'm sorry.
No, I would say that this will require a little more staff time. This is us taking this more in-house. This is us taking more control of our water utility and the billing. So I do expect that there will be a little bit more labor intensive on this front, and that will be through J and meter reading.
You mentioned resolution 60 was like the equipment. Are hand readers able to read, like if they have to go out and one of them isn't working and read it with a remote reader, or the ones we have now, will they work, or will we have to purchase new ones for this new system?
Well, that was the whole secret of why I wanted to use this company, is because it is the same company that we're currently using.
Okay.
And there are 3 ways, like I said, to read it. You can go out with a little touchpad and touch the meter.
And that's what I was kind of wondering if our
Right.
touchpad would work on it.
And it does, and you can go, it's the same system, and then you can also do I'm sorry, a Star Trek fan, I used to call it a tricorder. It looks very similar to a small laptop. That's why Michelle doesn't like me down here. It's just like a small laptop that you actually can actually do a drive-by read by it, and then we can do the tower itself.
Okay.
And we do own all of the equipment. Because we're getting a new tower, it'll have to be reprogrammed. And one of the issues that we're working at, I was thinking maybe we could use the same tower, and we can't. He said you can only run one FCC frequency off of the tower, so you need a tower for Eagle River and a tower for us. They will still need data. So one of the discussions I'm working with Eagle River is, do we push the data to them, or do they keep their own tower? Because it's on our tank. So we would want to consider leasing space to them or something like that.
Well, there's a way we could kind of, when they give us their data for a particular month, that when we're gathering data from our water system, any way to see if we're A-okay.
Sort of. Eagle River is more worried about what is going out of the pipe, so they only really base their annual analysis on January, February, March, and April, when obviously you're not watering your flowers and things like that. So they do want the data, but they will use it differently than we do, and that was one of the issues that we're running into, is that what they need is not what we need, and there's an awful lot of back and forth on it.
Any more questions for Jay?
Cool. Thanks, Jay.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 59, series 2024, a resolution authorizing the mayor of the town of Minturn to sign a managed service agreement with the multi-billing utility billing solutions for the town-wide water and trash billing and management services.
Eric seconds. Got me.
Okay, well, first time I've heard from Eric, so we'll give him the credit. Gusty, motion by Gusty, second by Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right.
I don't think there's any further discussion on 60, is there?
I don't think so. So next we have,
I'll make a motion to approve Town of Minturn, Colorado Resolution number 60, Series 2024, Resolution authorizing the mayor of town of Minturn to sign ownership disclosure and lease agreement with Spectrum Manager Lease Census for town-wide water and trash meter reading services.
10 seconds.
Motion by Tom, second by Kate. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. So next we have the fiscal year 2025 budget. Who wants to take it?
It's the day of J, what do you mean?
It's his happy season.
What,
Do you want to just cover the initial things first? The initial things before we get into the presentation?
not what's what the initial things were.
I'm sorry, I'm covering this. Okay.
And we worked all day long on this.
Looks like longer than all day. It's quite a bit of material there.
Okay, share screen.
Snickers.
I got a whole bowl of madness.
It's all right. Bad deal.
Okay. Here we are. So thank you for being with us tonight to talk about the 2025 budget. As you can imagine, Jay has put a lot of work into getting the budget to this point. The data that you have in front of you in your budget this evening is from September, but as you can imagine, we continue to work quite a bit behind the scenes on updating these numbers as they begin to reflect feedback that we have received from the town council. With that, I'm going to just jump right into it. So as you can imagine from this slide, the 2025 budgeted projects under infrastructure and services, and you'll see that I've broken this out according to the 2025 to 2027 council strategic plans priorities. I will start off by saying we are incredibly busy in 2025. We have more projects occurring than the sum of the town's general fund for 2025. So it's going to be a very busy year for 2025, and all of the projects you see on this slide, except for the town hall windows, I'm planning to oversee as the town manager. So we start off with the Main Street sidewalks and drainage. I won't go into that because you just had an entire presentation on this. I'm assuming no one has any questions. I'll move on to the Eco Trail completion. So this was supposed to be done 2 years ago. We had to stop short due to a variety of reasons. Eagle County Open Space and Trails has identified, or Eco Trails has identified that they would cover the cost of this. So we will be overseeing the project, which will be run by Ewing Construction. But they will be completing the Eco Trail from where it has left off to the town boundaries of Minturn, and inside the town boundaries of Minturn to the Minturn North project, where Minturn North will pick that up and complete that Eco Trail to the southern end of Minturn Road. Additionally, we have the Railroad Avenue safety improvements. This is about a $250,000 project. We heard a lot of feedback during the Minturn North public hearings about the need to improve multimodal safety along Railroad Avenue connecting Taylor Street to Main Street. So the town went and we got a grant, a Revitalizing Main Street CDOT grant for $226,000, and we have to match that with $25,200 for adding sidewalk along the northern side of Railroad Avenue, as well as traffic calming measures and a small bulb out at the intersection to increase line of sight. Oh, Earl doesn't want him killed.
I'll let him go.
Tried to kill the spider.
He's running around.
Next, we have the Little Beach Park retaining wall and playground. So the town of Minturn applied for a grant for improvements to be made to our retaining wall at Little Beach Park, our only park in town with a playground. The retaining wall has been moving year over year. Intermountain Engineering keeps track of that annually. So we applied for 2 different grants. We applied for a Department of Local Affairs EIAF grant, and we also applied for a GOCO grant. So we were going to use these grants to somewhat match each other to expand our ability to do the totality of phase 1 to the Little Beach Park plan improvements that were identified by the council back in 2023. We got the DOLA grant, we did not get the GOCO grant. So where we are at now is we need to decide, do we want to take the DOLA grant funding that we have for fixing the retaining wall? Do we want to use our match to replace the playground equipment and be done? Or do we want to fix the retaining wall, but, and this gets a little risky, use our match funds to design the entirety of the phase 1 project? The reason that GOCO didn't, the reason we didn't get the GOCO grant, one of the primary reasons is they said it wasn't construction ready. We still need to design it. So one of the questions came up is, do you want to take your matching funds and design what the new playground would look like and seating areas and get that to construction ready and then reapply for GOCO funds to do the whole of phase 1? It's a riskier proposition because if we don't get the GOCO grant, we also don't have a new playground.
If I could say, the playground is the thing that we always get hit on when we have our annual asset audit from our insurance company. They're like, it would be better if we just, the last comment was it'd be better if we took it out than to leave it in. It's just, it's 20 some, it's 20, almost 25 years old. And actually it was put in by a GOCO grant. The material on the ground, the wood chips is not sufficiently deep enough. It needs to be about 18 inches and it's not. There's splinters, there's, you know, some of the signs that were on there saying play carefully were riveted on and those broke off and now they're sharp. The park is a problem. The playground equipment in the park is a problem.
Yes.
I wasn't here for that design process. I've seen the conceptuals. The playground's in the same place in all those designs, right?
Essentially. So with the retaining wall repair, what's going to happen is another wall will basically go in front of it. The service road will get moved over and enlarged to make better access for the bands and such to get to the stage. And then the playground will work around that. And the playground itself has not been designed at all. We need kiddos to tell us what they want to see there. So essentially it's the same area.
Could we just buy new playground equipment with that money, the match?
We can.
Is there concern by the insurance company about liability because of the river being right next to the playground?
No. I mean, it's never come up. It's a park near a river is kind of the way to look at it. Nottingham Park has a lake right by it. Dillon and Frisco both have a lake right by it. It's not an issue. Everybody assumes the parents are actually going to be there watching the kids. Maybe that's a bad assumption, but.
So I am looking for direction from council if you would prefer that we move forward with purchasing the playground equipment as the match for the DOLA grant, or if you would prefer to design and engineer the remainder of the phase 1 portion of the Little Beach Park play upgrades and then go for the next round of DOLA GOCO grants.
Just to clarify, if we decide to buy the playground equipment, that will be in its new footprint based on the retaining wall?
That's right.
Exactly where it is now.
No, it would be in its new place. We are going to be doing the retaining wall
Right.
regardless.
I just wanted to be
Yes.
sure. But conceivably then if we redesigned it, we would redesign whatever around the
Yes.
brand new playground.
Yes.
So
We're required for that match though anyway, right? For the grant.
We're required to match the grant at a 50-50, so the 147, it just depends on how you all want to spend the 147.
I'm in favor of replacing the playground equipment and not hiring somebody to do the study.
Because I'm assuming we are running a risk of liability, you're saying, with the known hazards that the insurance company's highlighted, based on what you're saying?
And they've never said they wouldn't cover it, but they've always said fix it.
So, yes.
I will say there is certainly a risk if we take the funds and design and then don't get the GoCo grant, and then we don't have a new playground and we don't have a grant to do
So
anything else.
If we don't, if we take the funds and do everything, we will have to pay $147,000. But if we took the risk and used some of that money to do the planning, which sounds like you have to do that anyway, no?
So the planning would need to be done before we apply for the next phase of improvements to Little Beach Park. So there's seating areas involved, there's a multi-use court involved, there are river access involved. So those things all need to be designed and engineered. They've estimated that cost to design and engineer that is well over $100,000.
It seems to me that there's no reason to think that if we do that, that we wouldn't be able to get a grant that would pay for the whole thing.
I will say the grants, and I don't mean to come across as negative, but I just will say that the grants are incredibly competitive.
So you're not confident that we would get the GO grant if we did that?
I am not.
So
I mean, just to be.
let's say we move forward with just getting the playground done in 2025. I assume that we would then look for grants that would get us a design grant so we can do the shovel-ready stuff, get it ready for GoCo for the next round
We'll
in
commit that money in
2026.
future budgets.
Yes, either one of those things.
Okay, she's asking for directions. Shall we say a show of hands for getting the playground done completely?
I'm still a little confused.
So basically, you make a decision to just replace the playground equipment on the retaining wall. We put that money towards that now. Or you take all that money and you put it towards an entire design process. That's what it's gonna go towards, with an assumption that you will get the grant next go around to actually execute the plan.
And if we do the retaining wall,
We do the retaining wall anyway.
The retaining wall is being done no matter what.
okay, so at this point, if we just buy the new equipment and do the retaining wall, it will cost us $147,000 out of pocket.
It'll cost Minturn approximately $147,000. The totality of the project is just about $300,000.
But we have to do a match no matter what, the 140
That's
some
correct.
thousand, we're gonna have to pay that.
Anyway, and
Yes.
it's playground equipment or design for a thing that later we might get
That's
grants
right.
for or not.
And then I throw in the amazing 25% a year inflation rate that came out of, I don't know what
Yes.
world.
CDOT World.
Thank goodness it's not CDOT World. Okay, so anyway, show of hands that want to do the playground next year completely.
Eric.
You need any other direction?
Eric is also supportive of the playground.
Next year
Thank
is
you, Eric.
this
Yeah.
year.
2025, spring 25,
This,
Okay,
spring 25.
yes.
moving on, we have the Nelson Street repave and heat exchange project. We are still working to better understand the opportunities that exist within improving Nelson Street. So Nelson Street, including the hill portions required by the town, all needs to be repaved. Continually, we have heard from residents about the concerns of safety of this hill and how the hill ices in the wintertime. So we have started taking a look at how we can improve safety in this area. We will have an upcoming discussion as requested by Councilmember Feiger regarding direction of traffic and the such for this area and determine if that is something that can help. Another thing that we're looking at right now is what I have now learned is called a heat exchange, and that's whereby a new building would be constructed known as Eagle River Whiskey. And
Minturn Whiskey Company,
Minturn Whiskey Company.
in like 2 weeks.
In like 2 weeks. Okay, so Minturn Whiskey Company will be building a building. They will be actively working through the distilling process, which will leave extra heat. We would like to take that extra heat and use it to heat the roads instead of electrifying the roads. We anticipate there's an initial upfront cost that will be, higher, but that the long-term opportunity to capture some of our net zero goals might be realized. So we are in the process now of working with Minturn Whiskey Company's engineers to better understand what this looks like. That's why there's not a number there today. I just wanted to let you all know why there's no number there.
That's awesome.
We're pretty excited about this opportunity to take, a local establishment, use this option and create something new that to be done that would be very environmentally friendly. So
It's
And
pretty
we're
cool.
like weird in Minturn. We're heating our streets with whiskey discharge.
well,
That's a win.
and apparently
Noise heated me
Yeah,
up.
right. Come up with a better term than that.
And then the bad product we use is a surface spray, right?
So we are excited that this has been done in other communities with other distilleries. So there's a bit of a template to follow. So we're trying to work through that now. Norman Avenue repaving has come out to about $55,000 to repave both sides of Norman Avenue from the hill to the eastern side of the right-of-way. We checked with Norman Avenue residents if they were interested in paving their driveways while we did this project, and they firmly were not. So we checked. Town hall windows, we had the reserve study for town hall done some time ago. Windows were one of the first things recommended for replacement. Cindy Krieg and Jay have been working with companies to get cost estimates for this project. Right now, those estimates are coming in at about $120,000. That's not for the entirety of town hall. That does not include the post office, and it does not include parts of the apartments. Windows are another thing that are expensive. However, I can say that windows are only expected to go up 6% next year, not 25.
Oh, it's a
Yes.
bargain.
So if we sign onto a window replacement contract in 2024, we will see a 6% cost savings. And we are also taking a look at the custom efficiency cost savings program through Excel Energy, which may have the opportunity to provide us with funding retroactive to the project.
Cool.
So we'll see about that. That funding is budgeted in the 2025 budget. And then we have the Taylor Street grading and paving project. Jeff Spinell's team is preparing to start the survey work up there now. I've asked him if my estimate of about $750,000 is pretty close, and he said yes, given there's a lot of grading that's been requested to be done up there. So that is the totality of the 2025 budgeted projects for Minturn. That comes at a total cost of about $3.7 million, and we have $2.225 million that comes in grants for that. So we're pretty excited to be able to.
Do you have a sense for how much total construction use tax will come out of Minturn North?
Yes, when Minturn North did their analysis. They had to do a financial impact analysis, and I want to say the Minturn North construction use tax came to just over $1 million. Now we're paying the $750,000 out of reserves, capital improvement reserves, because we committed to the Taylor Street residents to do this quickly. But we expect to supplement that once it comes back in.
And then still have potentially
No.
more that hasn't been committed to spending.
Hopefully.
This is more infrastructure improvement in 1 year than I think we've had 3 decades.
Yes, we are very busy next year, but good things. Yeah, good things are coming. Okay, so with that, we will move on to new funding opportunities. So here we have a list of things that I currently have in the budget, but they're new. So I wanted you to all to take a look at them, see what you think about them, give yes, give no's, and make sure that we all stay on the same page as we go into the 2025 budget. So we've been talking for quite some time about the quiet titling of the Eagle River for the remediation area that was done by the EPA back in 2002. So again, this is for the river bottom. This is not for anyone's current property. But we estimate that's around $50,000, give or take, between engineering, which would be for surveying, as well as legal costs. You all just approved the Spectrum meter reading lease, which is a one-time cost of approximately $25,000. We then have the Minturn Forward project that we're doing, which is the Chapter 16 Land Use Code update. That's about $100,000. And will be a one-time cost until everyone wants to update Chapter 16 again. Historic preservation programming, so this was feedback that we received from the council regarding the need to value and encourage historic preservation in Minturn by putting some money behind it. So we have $10,000 set aside through the economic development budget to do things like the purchasing of the plaques for historic structures, signage to better help people do independent walking tours, funding to bring cemetery tours to town from the Eagle County Historical Society, and a variety of other measures that will allow us to further encourage and support historic preservation here in Minturn. Additionally, we have set aside in the economic development budget $5,000 to go toward the 2025 GoPro games. $12,000, this is $1,000 a month per business to go toward Minturn First Fridays. And I've gotten this question a couple times now. Minturn First Fridays do not have to be at restaurants. So we are open to a wide variety of locations, pending your location in Minturn that wants to hopefully expand what residents can see of what you provide and the opportunity to gather residents together on a monthly basis. So we're very open to what that might look like. And then the Bindu Sky Memorial Race Series is a race series similar to what we already support through the Vail Rec District, where it brings outside participants into town spending money in our restaurants and at times lodging. So what this $2,500 sponsorship would look like is still remains to be seen. It might be $5 gift cards to each participant to our restaurants to take their families there after an event. But we feel that that fits nicely with the Vail Rec District events that we already support.
Just a winter event, I take it as skiing?
Yes.
3 events.
3 events?
Will be. And just a side note, it's not listed here, but would also facilitate resurrecting the Barstool race series again.
It would not.
Just saying facilitate. But I have to talk to the Minturn Whiskey Company in 5 days.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, sorry. You can change that to cooperative, then it'll be 5 days.
So this money would go toward the Bindu Memorial specifically?
Yes, it would.
Not
Fucking efforts.
So just wanted to see what you all thought of, this is kind of what I put together, but I want to make sure that we all stay on the same page. And if you have questions or like to see changes made, this is a great time to do that.
So are we confident we can afford to do all this in 1 year and hire a public works director?
It's currently all budgeted, yes.
Okay.
Good answer.
Why does the Minturn forward, like what's behind $100,000 in updating that? I just don't understand that.
Right, so 2 meetings ago, I believe, we put that outline of that budget and what it goes toward, and so I can bring that forward to you all. And it shows how each article within chapter 16 gets updated, the modules that you have to go in and create, the public process that you have to go through to do that, the open houses that you need, all those things, and then joint work sessions with the council. And we have a third-party planner, Matt Farrar, who is helping to facilitate that. So that was his budget that he provided to us.
Didn't we budget some last year for that too? Then we got a grant also?
We did budget for some, we did not get the grant, we did not get a grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there going to be costs related to the Battle Mountain settlement, land use process and things like that, or is that all accounted for in our normal?
So I will say costs are still coming in from the Battle Mountain land use settlement. But in regards to public discussions that need to take place on what folks want to see with those parcels, that is included in the chapter 16, $95,850, because those are all part of the zoning discussions that need to take place. Yeah.
Oh.
Scott Hunn will be starting pretty soon on some of those southern parcels, the public discussions.
When we do have those public meetings, are we going to have sort of suggested alternatives, uses for the land that are worked out?
Mike Sawyer has indicated that it needs to be a very open process where all ideas are considered and nothing is jumped to conclusions. So we certainly can have all sorts of options available to folks.
That's what I meant.
Yes, but want to make sure we get a robust discussion from the public.
We got whiteboards.
Yes. Any other questions or feedback about this breakout of budgeted items that are newer? Actually, they're totally new.
We didn't contribute anything to GoPro last year.
We did not.
It's November. So, okay, with that.
And I take it we've concluded that we aren't in a position to fund the preschool.
We're not done with the presentation yet.
Oh,
Okay. Another slide. So the next slide.
It's like Michelle, she keeps asking, what about this?
Yeah, so these are the new items that were not originally budgeted, but we're looking at implementing or having the council consider implementing for 2025. So as you saw in the packet, included with the Eagle Valley Child Care Association was the link to the new offer that they sent over for what they could do with $25,000 annually plus $5,000 startup cost. So that includes, I believe, 5 spaces on the wait list plus a general movement, and I'm so sorry that it's not all coming back to me immediately, but a general ability for others to get on the wait list for Minturn specifically. Now, one thing that has come up since yesterday regarding the Eagle Valley Child Care Association opportunity is the passage of the Minturn short-term rental tax. So that passed yesterday, overwhelmingly passed yesterday, and we anticipate about $30,000 a year to come in from that new money. So although we have put this in the budget already, it's not technically budgeted because I want all of your approval. You just told me to come back and figure out what to do. So I want your approval on that. We do have money that we have essentially taken out of the buildings fund. So we had to take money out of the buildings fund for this $30,000, but I think moving forward, there's an opportunity if the council desires to take other revenue sources to help pay this cost. Now they are asking for a 3-year agreement. Minturn can only sign agreements based on annual appropriations. So it would be a year over year, but in essentially a 3-year. I will say, you know, Jay asked me today, is this a dire need? And I would say, is this funding for them a dire need? And I said, you know, I don't know how dire it is today, but I will say year over year, I think it is something that they need. You know, if Minturn is interested in keeping childcare in our community, they're leasing this land from the school district, and for us to help permanently keep them here, knowing that they have secure funding sources can help for the long-term benefit of the community.
So, direction, do we want to give direction to Michelle by using our new tranche of?
Oh, I have one comment on that. I told Michelle this before. On the entryway signage, that fancy sign for $65,000, I saw that sign in another community. And it's a very suburban feel to the sign. And I'm thinking that the rough and ready sign that we have already seems more appropriate to our community than the $65,000 sign. I'm not sure aesthetically it's much more polished, but it just doesn't seem very Minturn-like.
Well, to come back to childcare.
Yes, let's finish up
So-
what we're doing
Okay.
now.
So, question on this before we keep moving forward and give guidance on that. The sum total of everything sitting here, back to the question of, do we need to delineate a set of priorities? Because obviously, we don't have all that money set aside for all of that, do we?
We have, thank you, approximately 300,000 right now left to work with. Now, what I have traditionally done with Jay in the past is when there is an overage surplus at the end of the year, we have always moved that money into the capital improvement fund, which is why we now have $1 million in that capital improvement fund. Because I said, let's just start putting it in there because we're gonna have a lot of projects to do. So this is money that, if not spent, would normally just go directly into the capital improvement fund and then wait for other opportunities like grant matches and the such. So this is entirely up to council.
So that $300,000 in addition to 170 roughly you got delineated here. Are there any other line items that 300K is likely going towards other than diverted into the fund?
No.
Okay.
You said that there was a 3-year agreement with them, so we do $25,000 for 3 years. We do the 5,000 once this year. That gives us 5 spots. Is it just the 5 spots for the 3 years, or is there like guaranteed down the road?
You know, I'd have to read the Eagle Valley Child Care, the link that's in here to confirm. I want to say it's for the 3 years, but I would need to read that to confirm. I don't want to give an inaccurate answer.
Okay, I'd be more interested if, you know, it was for a longer duration. But, you know, if we're only just paying $25,000 a year just for those 5 spots, and then, you know, at the end of the 3 years, we lose the 5 spots.
Okay, here's the agreement. Let's just do this.
Isn't it 10 years? I mean, 10 spots, I mean?
No.
It was 10, I think, when we were
Minturn
doing that
agrees to provide
100,000.
EVCCA with an initial financial contribution of $5,000 paid 30 days, followed by ongoing annual financial contributions of $15,000 annually paid within 30 days. Following the opening of Minturn Family Enrichment Center for the purposes of reserving 5 child care spaces in the new Minturn Family Enrichment Center upon opening, estimated to be estimated this month. EVCCA agrees to allocate 5 Minturn Family Enrichment Center spaces based first on waitlisted Minturn residents, followed by Minturn residents not currently on the waitlist. Minturn agrees to provide EVCCA with an additional annual contribution of $10,000 paid for the purposes of providing Minturn residents with access to EVCCA's priority waitlist. That's the part I was missing. allowing Minturn residents to enroll their children in EVCCA programs ahead of other families on the public waitlist. EVCCA agrees to provide Minturn residents with access to priority waitlist, allowing Minturn residents to enroll. Oh, I read that. Centers no longer maintain a wait. If EVCCA centers no longer maintain a waitlist, the parties will reevaluate the terms of the agreement to ensure mutual benefit. Benefits: immediate access to childcare, 5 children of Minturn residents. Ongoing access to priority waitlist. Minturn residents will enjoy reduced wait times for childcare placement, providing a significant benefit compared to families on the public waitlist. Terms: this agreement will commence upon the effective date. It will remain in effect for 1 year, automatically renewing for successive year terms unless either party provides written notice of termination. So this is only good for the terms of the agreement. So
It's a continuing obligation.
if we contribute every year, we get the wait list every year. If we don't contribute, we don't
You're
get the
not on
wait
that.
list.
Do you foresee a problem or issue with there being a lot more than 5 children that want to be on the wait list and there being some kind of conflict there?
They have currently already identified there are hundreds on the wait list.
Minturn, I mean.
Sure.
I think it's fair to say that that would occur, and they handle that. That does not get handled by the town.
Okay.
So other than getting the Disney Fast Pass priority, there is no cost reduction per family, correct?
Not in this
From the-
agreement.
And then they don't really say anything about additionality. Like that was a question that we kind of put to them, and this doesn't address that at all. Like, if they didn't reserve us 5 spaces, there's probably 5 kids from Minturn, they're going to be in there. So like, are they saying like in the current wait list, we're going to then take an additional 5 spots and allocate
Right.
those to Minturn people, or is that just like, there'll be 5? Like there might
Right.
already be 5.
They don't address that.
Sounds like there are 2 lists, a priority list.
Well,
and a
priority list
regular
is important, which is I think to get
And
on.
I think all that this allows us is to be on the priority list.
Well
But I
then,
think it's important to
There's 2.
clarify,
yeah.
like if the first 10 people, 5 of them are already from Minturn, do we get, because of this agreement, the next 5? Or do they just count the 5 that we're already doing? Right, that's kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, because I'm hearing, people that are doing work over there in town are getting their kids in,
Oh,
or
I
getting
see.
prominence and
I
things like
see.
that. So like if we don't sign this,
Yeah.
are there gonna be 5
Yeah.
kids
So
there?
there is.
And if there's
double
counts,
division.
then it's only 4, like if one of them's doing work over there.
So it's 5 kids who wouldn't otherwise have priority status.
Well, that's what we need to clarify.
Yeah, that's what we need to clarify. And then I have a question, I brought this up, I don't know where we're at with leasing and all of that, but in the future, would there be any options, say one of our residences opens up the town, that we could switch cash contribution to an in-kind like master lease with the childcare service? Because I feel like that would be like a win-win for town. You have somebody living here that works here and all of that.
So that is certainly at the discretion of the council. So right now, when one of the apartments opens up, teachers are on the list of folks that fit into the categories taken under the deed restricted lower cost rents.
I wonder.
But if council wants to do something more specific, like a master lease specifically for the Eagle Valley childcare, that is something that the council can consider.
I wonder if we couldn't use that for leverage to get a better deal.
But they know
I
right
think
now they're
that's-
not open, but yeah.
I think it would be worth exploring that.
Well, I mean, the good news is this is 1 year renewing, so like if that happened, that would be, I would assume, part of the next year renewal, right?
Or you just don't renew it if it doesn't work out.
Well, just to throw a tangent in here, what's the legality as opposed to this priority list? Because as it's already been highlighted, based on the capacity that was already briefed, we'll just assume 5 or 10 intern kids are already on the list. Economic needs statements for certain families, because obviously the biggest issue with childcare is cost. So putting that money towards defraying childcare costs for families.
I think even bigger in our county is availability regardless.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I'm just pointing out if we're quibbling over, again, we've got this line, there's already 5 intern kids into it. Now we're trying to figure out, does priority piece for another 5 or whatever, that's great. But again, pointing out the fact that it's still expensive. I'm just driving at, I don't know how they're gonna avoid double dipping, as the term was just used, because they're like, okay, first 5 kids on the list from Minturn, got that quota, check, moving on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I want to avoid. So I want just like
Agreed.
clarity from them on how they would report to us and whether that's.
So if we got that clarity, great. Otherwise, what I'm suggesting is that we look at cost offset for families that meet the economic need requirements within the town of Minturn.
I don't know that we should open that door.
That's why I said it's a
I
tangent.
think that
but
would
it's an
take
issue.
additional,
I have a question.
I would assume with cost offsets, they would just say, okay, but they're not gonna be on the priority. They got hundreds of kids in line, right, on the public list. So to me, it's just kind of straightforward, but clarity on like what Brian and you were talking
They
about.
have to be, I think we're all in agreement, it has to be 5 places that wouldn't be on the priority list otherwise.
The question I have is, we're coming down to the end of the budget process. I kind of would like direction is, do you want me to earmark this
Yes.
this way and we're getting clarification, or is this a deal breaker? Okay.
I would earmark it and then just work out the details.
Either way,
Yeah,
childcare.
it would be a deal breaker if they wouldn't do that, but I
It's
think they'll
important,
do that.
yeah.
Well, clearly by the cost of the BMX jump line, that's a higher.
That's a weird one, because I came from that board meeting and we talked about the Minturn Bike Park, and I talked to the managers with them about like ideas, and I was like, can we, as somebody who has 2 kids, we're always down in Eagle now and they love the kid thing. I asked them if a bunch of dads around here could just go out there and modify one of the lines to add some more like kids skill stuff, and they were like, yeah, go for it. Like, we don't have any budget for this. So they didn't tell me that they were gonna submit that to you. And if they did, I probably would have said, not this year, like push it down. So that's my take on that.
I mean, that's $60,000.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do for $60,000?
Right, so
I have no idea. The idea was that we had identified that a bunch of dads were going to get together and throw a Kickstarter next year.
So there's a lot of beer.
No, it's the skills course. I don't know if you've been to the Eagle one. It's
Yep,
packed
yep.
all the time.
Yep.
There's a kids section where they can hit these like very beginner little rollery things, and it was just to add some features like that to Minturn. It was kind of our idea, but we didn't talk about any money at all.
Basically a pump track.
No,
Not
Not
a
necessarily.
varsity one.
Okay, we're getting a little offline here.
but anyway, so I would just say I'm against putting those in, even though I'm on the board. I'll just say that.
That's what this is.
would the council like to just move along and not consider either of the Minturn Bike Park options and move on to Minturn Market?
Sure.
Okay.
Wait. Eric is very much in favor of these bike park expenses. My son uses this bike park several times a week and would love to see more added to it. So I disagree with Brian.
that. We just need more clarity on what $60,000 based on your comment at the last meeting. There seems to be a disconnect.
Yeah, I need to catch up with Ernest or Sammy, because at our last VVMTA board meeting, we discussed this and there was I just brought up like in the future, there would be awesome to have some of those kid features in Minturn that they built in Eagle to great expense. And we learned a lot from the design and things, and think that we could do some of that stuff without hiring somebody else out and save a lot of money, was what we went through. So I don't know where those numbers came from.
Because nonetheless, though, the bike park needs some sort of.
Sure. I'm just saying, set it aside.
So
More
maybe
fidelity.
it just needs to be more developed.
That's all. Just need more fidelity on what this is, and then we can make a decision.
Okay.
Hey, once again, Jason will need to.
It
Have some
sounds
direction
like
there,
it's not
too.
quite ready for,
But I think I would still be comfortable that you're working money for it, and if it doesn't materialize, then we just put that in the SIP, right?
Well, I think we can, just as we said at the outset, we could just say thumbs up to all of this, and then flesh it out.
Yeah, but if it doesn't work out, then we've got a little surplus.
Okay.
that
Goes
makes
back to the capital.
Well, I do want to talk about the entryway signage for a minute.
Okay.
because I have received feedback from some of you that there is concern about the entryway signage and it not being what folks had anticipated it would be. So I understood the goal of the entryway signage to be to improve communications with Minturn residents and visitors. We have been using the portable construction sign this summer as kind of a way to see if that could be effective in getting communications to folks. And I would say so far, I think that it is certainly helping. That being said, we were looking at then creating something more permanent at the entryway to town that could be a little more, or a little less construction-like, although Lynn likes the construction. So I will say for $65,000, that price continued to increase, and staff is not recommending an entryway sign at $65,000. I would say, you know, it's a bit of a pain constantly moving the orange sign out front, but it seems to work.
Are we gonna be able to have it there in the winter? Is there a place to put it, or are we gonna just not do them in the winter time?
No, I'm hopeful we can have it there in the winter too, because in the winter, we especially need it to tell the truckers they can't stop on Main Street and chain up. We've had this problem multiple times and it creates real safety issues. There will be a permanent chain up area at the south end of town down by Tigawan, so we really want to communicate with those drivers that they can stop just a couple miles down the road and safely chain up before they start heading over Battle Mountain Pass. So I am hopeful we can continue using that. I've already talked to CDOT about coordinated messaging for those efforts.
Somebody came up to me at First Friday and said, why don't we just like send Kelly Toon and some of the creative historical
Should we just,
preservation
like,
people out there and
dress
just
up
be like,
like a
yeah,
construction
dress up
sign?
and have them use their creative minds for a budget and figure out a cheap way to make it not look construct. Could you build like a little wall in front of the trailer
Like a
park so
little-
just the sign pops up or something?
I reckon
Kelly
the
did come up
sandwich
with
board,
something.
you change the sandwich board every day.
Yeah.
No.
65 grand. You stand out there.
Yeah. 2 days ago.
Got you on that
Chain
one.
up, 3 miles ahead.
He's already gonna be employed with a speed gun.
Big
That's
sandals.
right.
Like a Kleenex box. on
That's
the
right.
side. Yeah.
Chicken Man will be out there with a speed gun and a camera to shame them.
Perfect.
Moving or like would it make sense to buy now other orange signs? You don't have to move them as much. I don't know. Are there other?
Well, I do anticipate eventually we will own more than one orange sign. That just makes sense in
How
general.
much do they cost?
You know, the one that we have right now is about 25,000.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, then we had to pay to trailer it, and
Yeah.
25,000 all in.
So I would say.
I think it was budgeted at 20 and we ended up at 22. Sorry, not 25.
I would
Would
say
it be
like
wise to
everything
buy
else.
another one instead of the permanent?
It's something we can look into.
Well, if you're not recommending that,
We're not recommending the entryway sign at 65,000.
Are we gonna say no?
I was just gonna say, again, set aside, earmark it, get the creative minds of Minturn together and give them options and then see what they come up with, and then we can
But
make some decisions.
It might make it less portable if you don't put stuff around it.
well, but if we acquired a second, then maybe that one doesn't need to be super portable. Cause it could
Right.
just sort of live there.
Creative enough to.
Maybe eventually
Okay.
that would be the solution.
Like some sort of
Well, having it in a portable state, particularly in that area due to that road, the rock, the cliff line, et cetera, the ability to do it when we need to, construction, et cetera, is not a bad thing. So either way.
Are we done with the presentation?
Yes, we are finished.
We'll open this up for public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that would like to talk about our budget? None? Yeah. Jay, is there anybody out there?
That's okay.
No, there are no attendees.
Public hearing? Okay, next item on the agenda, we have no discussion or direction item. Well, we just gave a whole bunch of direction. Future agenda items.
So just a reminder to everyone, we will be having a joint work session on December the 4th for discussing the Minturn Forward project. So please put on your calendars 4:30 for a work session. We also will be preparing to bring forward the Midtown Village project that'll be coming forward. And then on November 20th, we have the net zero roadmap work session also at 4:30.
And then on the 18th, direction on the Minturn water treatment plant funding options.
December 18th.
Direction or decision?
Well, we're gonna lay out all the information, and yes, hopefully it'll be direction to move forward with the proper amount of process of our decision.
That's a lot of word salad to say decision. Decision. Just say it, please.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I don't want to say that word.